In the autumn of 14 AD, with the mutiny on the Rhine brutally suppressed and the legionaries' demands grudgingly met, Germanicus turned his gaze toward Germania's untamed tribes. Leading a formidable army of 4 legions, 8 cavalry units, and 26 cohorts of auxiliary, Germanicus was determined to reassert Rome's dominion over the territory and exact vengeance for the devastating loss inflicted by the Clades Variana. Germanicus's first target was the Marsi tribe, and his plan was as meticulous as it was ruthless. Intelligence had revealed that the Marsi would be in the throes of their autumn religious festival, a time of feasting and revelry when vigilance would be at its lowest. Seizing this opportunity, Germanicus led his troops through dense, rugged forests, taking a circuitous route to avoid detection. His objective was clear: strike without warning, and leave no chance for escape. As night fell, and the Marsi celebrated, unaware of the doom closing in, the Roman forces silently encircled their villages, cloaked by the darkness of the forest. Just before dawn, when the Marsi lay deep in slumber, Germanicus unleashed his attack. The assault was swift, it was brutal, and it was absolute. The massacre that followed was not merely a battle, but an annihilation. Every man, every woman, and every child was massacred without mercy, their lives extinguished in the very beds where they slept. Not even the animals were spared from the slaughter. Next, Germanicus directed his wrath toward the grove of Tanfana. This sacred site was where the Marsi came to offer prayers and sacrifices to Tanfana, the Germanic goddess of fertility, war, and victory. Set ablaze at the command of Germanicus, the flames that consumed the grove symbolized, in striking irony, Rome's triumph over the Marsi's very symbol of victory. Germanicus then divided his cavalry units and auxiliary cohorts between his 4 legions. He commanded them to ride out in all directions for 50 miles and neutralize any enemies surrounding the defeated Marsi. The Roman legions took no prisoners. Regardless of age or sex, every person perished by Rome's swords, leaving no room for mercy. As the news of the massacre spread, Germanicus gathered his forces and began a meticulous withdrawal, maintaining a tight formation as he led his troops back towards the Rhine River. The retreat, however, was fraught with danger. The tribes, enraged by the slaughter of their neighbors and the desecration of their sacred grove, seized the opportunity to strike back. Emulating the ambush strategy employed by Arminius against Publius Quinctilius Varus, the Germanic tribes launched a savage attack on the rear of Germanicus's stretched-out military train. But Germanicus had anticipated just such a counterstrike. His foresight proved invaluable, as the legionaries he'd discreetly positioned at the rear repelled the Germanic assault with resolute success, ensuring the safe passage of his entire military force through the treacherous forests. Having secured a victory in the initial phase of his vengeance against Germania, Germanicus returned to the Rhine. There, he put his legions into winter camp. Reflecting on the hard-fought successes he'd just won, Germanicus then spent the winter months planning an aggressive campaign that would spring forth with the coming season. In the spring of 15 AD, Germanicus initiated the second phase of his campaign against Germania, targeting the Chatti tribes. He entrusted approximately 4 legions and 5,000 auxiliary fighters to one of his generals, Aulus Caecina Severus, dispatching this force northward. Another of his generals, Lucius Apronius, was assigned a contingent of auxiliary units with orders to construct roads and bridges, facilitating the movement of Roman forces through the challenging terrain of Germania. Caecina's mission was to use his legions to harass and destabilize the Cherusci, the very tribe of Arminius, architect of Rome's humiliating defeat at the Teutoburg Forest. By positioning Caecina's legions strategically between the Cherusci and the Chatti, Germanicus also aimed to prevent any alliance between these formidable Germanic tribes before his full offensive was unleashed. With all eyes on Caecina's army, the Cherusci occupied with defensive maneuvers and Germanic raiding parties harassing the Roman construction crews, Germanicus seized the opportunity to strike against the Chatti. Once again, he launched a surprise attack. In the ensuing chaos, many of the Chatti fled their homes and sought refuge in the dense, shadowy forests. To further instill terror and assert his military dominance, Germanicus employed the same ruthless tactics he had used against the grove of Tanfana. The primary Chatti settlement, Matium, was reduced to ashes. Germanicus then dispatched his 4 legions in every direction, ravaging the Chatti's lands with relentless force. By the end of this brutal assault, Germanicus had taken countless men, women, children and elders captive, all destined for Rome's slave markets. As Germanicus's forces fell into line after their decisive victory over the Chatti, the echoes of battle still resonated through the air, and the acrid scent of smoke and ash lingered. The legions, though bloodied and weary, stood triumphant, preparing to withdraw before a retaliation was launched against them. But news soon arrived that Aulus Caecina Severus, Germanicus's general in the north, had secured a remarkable prize. When the 2 armies converged, Caecina approached, his face marked with the satisfaction of a mission accomplished. He had not only kept the Cherusci occupied, preventing them from uniting with the Chatti, but he had also procured a captive whose presence could shift the balance of power in the conflict against Arminius. The captive was Segestes, a Cherusci chieftain and a fervent advocate for a Roman-Germanic alliance. Segestes had once bravely ridden into the camp of Publius Quinctilius Varus, warning of Arminius's betrayal. But because Arminius had wed Segestes' daughter without permission, Varus had naively dismissed Segestes' warning as the vengeance of a slighted father-in-law. 5 days later, almost 20,000 Roman soldiers lay dead on the floor of the Teutoburg. After the annihilation of Rome's forces, Segestes had been held hostage by Arminius, who retained control over the Cherusci. Yet, with Arminius distracted by desperate attempts to rally support from other tribes, Segestes seized the opportunity presented by the arrival of Caecina's legions. Amidst the chaos of Rome's assault, Segestes made his escape and surrendered to Caecina. But Segestes did not come alone. With him was his daughter, Thusnelda, who was not only Arminius's wife, but also pregnant with his child. In a dramatic gesture of allegiance and goodwill, Segestes handed Thusnelda over to Caecina as a hostage, signalling his commitment to Rome and his willingness to aid their cause against Arminius. The utter annihilation of the Marsi, the destruction of the sacred grove of Tanfana, the defeat and capture of the Chatti, the burning of Matium to the ground, and now, the acquisition of the wife and unborn child of Arminius. Before the very eyes of the Rhine legions, the stature and legend of Germanicus was growing. Now, to complete his own mythology, all Germanicus had to do was face the dead. At the site of the Teutoburg massacre, Germanicus and his legions came to a solemn halt. Even after 6 years, the ground bore the scars of the horrific events that had transpired. They passed the remnants of the first camp Varus had made, the one from which he had fled under cover of darkness, abandoning his wounded. The camp was marked in the standard Roman fashion, with sections designated for eagles, officers, and soldiers. But a shallow ditch, reinforced by a makeshift wall, revealed the desperate attempts of the wounded to evade their assailants. The desolate landscape bore silent witness to the massacre. The remnants of the barriers Arminius had erected to trap Varus's legions remained, casting long shadows across the open plain. Bleached by years of exposure, scattered piles of human bones, partial horse skeletons, broken shields, and splintered spears littered the ground. Human skulls, nailed to the surrounding trees, stared out with hollow eyes, frozen in eternal terror. In the encircling forest, Germanicus's legions uncovered grim altars where savage sacrifices and brutal executions had been performed, their grisly remnants including the bones of military tribunes and centurions. Guided by the survivors of the Varian disaster, Germanicus was shown the sites of critical moments, where a legate had fallen, where a soldier had been cut down, where the eagles were captured, where the cavalry had fled, where Varus received his first wound, and even the spot where Varus had ended his own life. The guides recounted the tribunal from which Arminius had harangued, proudly displaying the severed head of Publius Quinctilius Varus. They spoke of the gibbets and torture pits, where Roman soldiers had endured unimaginable suffering, and of the arrogance and obscenities with which Arminius had mocked Rome's captured eagles. As Germanicus stood amid the remnants of the battle, the weight of the past pressed down on him. The landscape was a stark reminder of the loss and betrayal that had unfolded here. The silence around him was heavy with the echoes of past horrors, and the sight of the devastation stirred a profound sense of grief and solemn reflection. Overcome by the magnitude of the moment, Germanicus wept.